Hi, and welcome to the Hypnotex podcast. I'm Rob from Hypnotex, and today I just wanted to talk really quickly about something that hypnosis and hypnotherapy are really, really good at, and that's eliminating anxiety. Now, usually when somebody comes to me and says, I have a phobia, can hypnotherapy and hypnosis help? My response is that probably. And I'll hedge that a little bit because it depends upon the person. And hypnosis and hypnotherapy, like any sort of a therapy or even physical therapy or even surgery or medications, everything depends upon the person when it comes down to this sort of thing. But one thing that is almost universal is that hypnosis is an anxiety eliminator. Now, this has been made fun of if you've ever seen the movie Office Space. There's a guy in it who seeks out hypnotherapy, and he goes from being anxious to being so chilled and laid back. Actually, he's in hypnotic trance when his hypnotist dies. I know, it's outlandish. It's a funny movie, but we hypnotherapists and hypnotists refer to it on a fairly regular basis. But the guy's in the chair, and then he's deeply entranced, and of course the hypnotist is doing all the typical TV things for hypnosis. You're feeling sleepy, you're feeling very relaxed, and in the midst of that, the guy, the hypnotherapist, dies, keels over, clutches his chest, and falls onto the floor. Of course, we've covered this in previous podcasts, and if you look around my site at all, you're going to find it in the fact, even if I manage to die during your session, you're going to snap out of it. But somehow, just to move the story forward here, it's a plot thing, but the guy doesn't come out of trance. And so he remains in this ultra chill standpoint, and it makes him super, super relaxed, and he's able to deal with the stresses of the day and his job, hence the name Office Space, that he was previously not able to deal with. And interesting, they kind of almost got it right. That sense of chill is definitely a side effect or a direct effect of hypnosis and hypnotherapy. But to be completely fair, so they decided to make him get stuck in trance, and so he was permanently that way. And that's factually completely wrong. Nobody ever gets stuck in trance, but they could have done pretty much the same story and been factual by showing that the after effects of hypnotherapy and hypnosis carried on and lingered. And so as a result, he was more chill. And so sticking point for those of us in the industry, great to see this sort of mostly positive portrayal of hypnosis after all of the hypno-zombie movies. But they could have done it right. They really, if they'd consulted somebody, if I had been on that movie set, I would have said, hey guys, you can actually 100% accurately and favorably portray hypnosis by having this guy seek out hypnotherapy and then showing him woke up. The hypnotist doesn't even have to die, although I get it, it's a comedy, so that's funny, right? Hypnotist dies during the session? Well, maybe not funny, but funny. But you could have just shown him ending the session and then coming out and feeling much better, because with the sort of anxiety that the gentleman was suffering from, that's actually a effect. It's something we targeted. We had this global pandemic thing. You're familiar with it? I suspect you probably are. And a lot of people have come out of this global pandemic thing with higher levels of anxiety. They're still worried about the illness itself, and of course now they're worried about the economy. They're worried about the how do we come out of this. There's a lot of things to be worried about in day-to-day life right now, and so people are more anxious than usual. And interesting, I have seen a significant uptick in anxiety clients coming in. I'm not the least bit surprised. Face it, I think it's the rare person who is not anxious these days, or doesn't point at anxiety and then doesn't sort of feel that one way or another. And of course, some symptoms or things that you may recognize as anxiety, this feeling of impending doom when you sit there and you think, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to make this happen? I got all these responsibilities, etc. That feeling of impending doom, that's the edge of anxiety. And at the far end of anxiety is the full-blown panic attack. And boy, you get to that point and it starts to get ugly. But in between, there's shortness of breath where you just don't feel well, increased heart rate, muscle tension. A lot of people carry it, jaw, neck, shoulders, stressed, irritability. Somebody snaps at you, you're balancing the checkbook and just wondering, man, I really hope that my company continues to do okay despite this global pandemic thing. And you're worried about where money's coming from even more than you were before. And so irritability, you snap at people, and it's not really them you're snapping at. It's the situation that's the sort of overwhelming stress that you find yourself in. Nervous stomach, upset stomach, and hypnotherapy and cognitive behavioral therapy, these things really tend to help in this space. So as you start to feel anxiety, now, typically, and this is a trend that I've noticed, I see a lot of uncertainty. I see people who wait until the last minute. They wait until they've gotten into that panic attack stage, and then they get hold of me and they say, oh my goodness, can you help? You are my last resort. So let me throw right out here right now. As I'm saying, hypnotherapy really does a great job against anxiety, whether it be low level, whether it be acute, generalized. If you're feeling anxious, you can feel less anxious from hypnotherapy. And there's actually evidence that it indicates that it causes long-term changes in the way that your brain processes stressful situations. Lots and lots of studies that indicate that. Lots and lots of studies from places that I like that are medical oriented and peer reviewed. Hypnosis does a great job for anxiety, period. It's incontrovertible. You can go look that up yourself. There's a million different places to check that out. So don't wait till the last minute. You're feeling anxious, reach out. Find yourself a hypnotherapist. Say, hey, I really don't feel like I'm me. I really feel like what's the saying? A long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Very illustrative there. Just constantly looking over my shoulder. If you're feeling that way, you don't have to. Now, I get it. There's stresses, and obviously you don't want to be too tuned out like the guy in Office Space where you basically ignore threats to your well-being. That's not what we're talking about here, but we are talking about, there's an old saying that says worrying is like paying a debt that may not come due. You ever notice that you can worry about a bunch of stuff and then most of that stuff isn't necessarily the worst case scenario? You identify, I need to worry about the worst case scenario, but it turns out that the worst case scenario is seldom what ends up happening. So as a result, you've expended a tremendous amount of energy and a lot of discomfort. And that situation seldom arises. It's seldom the worst case scenario. So you can dial it down a little bit. You're really doing yourself a favor. Now, we don't operate well when we are in fight, freeze, flight, when our heart is pounding, when the adrenaline is running. That's really a lizard brain reaction to get us to get out of a situation or to save our own lives. But when you're worried about something, if right now you're gainfully employed and the company shows no real signs, but there's this generalized feeling that the economy's not doing well and that your sector may be in a downturn and you're worried about something that's a more immediate than off in the distance. And that's the problem, is that it makes total sense to be anxious. If your boss comes and says, hey, pack up your desk, obviously you're going to kick into that mode. And again, that's not what we're talking about. What we're talking about is that by all signs, you came in today, you sat down at your desk, or you worked from home today and your job was still there and you did the things that you normally do, but you have this sort of amorphous squishy feeling that something is wrong on the horizon, and you're already reacting to that. And the worst part is that you get this cycle going where the minute you start to think about it, you worry more, and then you worry more, you start to think about it, and your brain rewards you with this endorphin dump by saying, hey, look, I had a panic attack, and that saved you from the problem, which wasn't really. It was the problem wasn't going to be a problem. And so you get this awful feedback loop going, and it really doesn't tend to get better on its own. It can. You can figure that out, and people do that, but it's so much easier to have help, and it's a lot easier to have a shortcut. And hypnotherapy does an incredible job. Now, it is totally normal to actually have anxiety about coming in for your hypnotherapy session. And I know that seems funny, like it's a pile-on kind of thing. And I'm going to throw that out there that in the one of the other podcasts that I did, What to Expect in Your First Session, I talked a little bit about that anxiety, but it's always an interesting thing for me to, when people finally arrive for their first session, to talk to them and to kind of gauge their anxiety level and to see where they're at. And I've had people who had worked themselves up into a panic attack over coming in for their first session. It was going to be scary. They were worried about the old hypno-zombie, a loss of control thing, none of which are true, etc. And once again, worst case scenario, they're sitting at home and they're thinking, well, I finally took the first step. I'm going to go get hypnotherapy. And then, but what happens if this? What happens if that? What happens if any of the cliche things that I've seen in the movies? How scary is that going to be? So I do want to throw out that if you're going to do hypnotherapy, that you've already taken the big scary first step by making an appointment, and now you're going to come in. So reach out. Whoever your hypnotherapist is more than likely going to be 100% on board on trying to help you not be quite so apprehensive. Now, a little bit of stress, a little bit of nervousness is completely normal. It's a new situation. You're thinking about the things that you've seen in movies. You know, you're going to go in and you're going to sit in a chair, and maybe you're going to have your eyes closed, and maybe he's going to say you're getting sleepy, and what's that thing about a pocket watch, and all those things that you worry about leading into the session. But let me assure you that any hypnotherapist worth their salt will walk you through that. I'm more than happy to do a video consultation with you in advance if that's what you'd like to do. No hypnosis there, but to sit down, show you the office, talk to you about what it looks like, talk to you about what's going to happen, help you relax, even help you to get to know me. Now, we use a little bit of apprehension. We can use a bit of nervousness because that is a kind of a gateway into hypnosis. When somebody's nervous, oftentimes their mind is looking for someone to take the lead. And so as a result, we can use that. We can use a little confusion. We can use a little anxiety. If you come in and your palms are a little wet, that's great. As a hypnotherapist, I look at that and I see that as an opportunity. But you should not be losing sleep the night before, and you certainly should not be having panic attacks over it. I'm just not that scary, okay? So reach out, find your way in. So now, anxiety and hypnosis. Why? Well, it turns out that anxiety and the thing that we conveniently refer to as trance, they're pretty much incompatible. And when you are in my big comfy chair, and when you are settled into that state that we call trance, you can't really feel anxiety in that state. And I'm going to use the term relaxation, and I get that the purists are going to argue and say that hypnosis is not relaxation, and I'm right there with you. But again, the podcast is primarily for laymen, and so we do need to use terms that are convenient for people to put their hands around, like the word sleep. We use that as a sort of a mechanism because it's the closest thing to hypnosis that most people have experienced. So let's not argue over trance and whether it exists and what it is. That's another podcast, and we'll get there. I keep promising that, but we'll dig deep into that. But so it's you're sitting there, and we use that nervousness, that little bit of edge that you've got. And if you're not nervous, that's fine too. We've got other tools, but a little bit of nervousness, and you find yourself sort of slipping into this comfortable, often relaxed state. Primarily in hypnotherapy, you are relaxed, even though, like, again, that's not essential for hypnosis, and it's not necessarily what hypnosis is. But you find yourself relaxing, you find yourself settling in, you find yourself kind of drifting, dreaming, resting, and relaxing. That's a phrase that I like to say. And the more that you relax in, the more that the anxieties sort of recede into the distance. And this is where my training kicks in, my opportunity to sort of show you what it's like to feel more normal. Lead by example. We're all real good. I can tell you, hey, you shouldn't be stressed. See? And then I can charge you $100 and that fixed you, right? No. There's no fix there. And but with hypnotherapy, you can actually experience it. So for that 30 minutes or 45 minutes or full hour that you are in that trance state, you don't experience anxiety. Now, there's a lot of things that you can learn in half an hour. If we were to sit down, I could teach you to play a G chord on a guitar. I could teach you how to use elementary skills on a computer. I could teach you how to use a mouse, a keyboard, that kind of thing. So 30 minutes is quite a long time, and it turns out that because of a concept known as time dilation, which is where your subconscious really just sometimes doesn't have a great concept of time. So in half an hour, we can do a lot of rehearsals. We can practice being not anxious. We can practice replacing that with a more focused, sort of dialed in feeling. And straightforward and easy. So any hypnotherapist is likely to have had some training. Of course, you can check with them and find out, check their credentials and make sure that they have had specific anxiety training, if that's what you're coming in for. They definitely, the fun part is that hypnosis all by itself, you're pretty much going to get an impact on anxiety. But if you're having serious issues with anxiety, you're going to want to go to somebody who has specific training in that space. And make sure that that's something that they're going to focus on and that they know to focus on. And as I've mentioned in virtually every podcast, I like informed consumers. I like informed clients. I like people who know what they're up against and what they're getting into. So learn all about anxiety, and you're a hypnotherapist, research them, make sure that you know exactly who you're going to see. So in the trance state, that thing that we call trance, that state that hypnosis places you in, however you want to refer to it, as that happens, we have a series of sort of, I work in a very Ericksonian space, so I like to tell stories. And there are a lot of other techniques. There are entire catalogs of techniques surrounding anxiety and hypnosis. And so there's a ton of tools there. I think I probably know 15 or 20 different angles to go after anxiety. But like I say, as an Ericksonian, I like to do stories. And so I like to tell a story that your subconscious is going to pull some meaning out of, and then it's going to be lasting, and there's going to be this sort of relatable aspect to it. And so you're sitting there in the chair and you're experiencing this state, and I'm doing what's called anchoring, setting that state up such that it sticks with you, it's attached to things, and then setting up triggers as well, telling you that you will find that state stays stuck, and in fact it will be reinforced every time a certain thing happens or a certain event. And oftentimes that's, we've discussed, and you've told me the things that set off your anxiety, and so now we're going to set up these triggers that will cause that sort of feeling to come back again when you are in a situation that would normally trigger your anxiety. And so it turns out that you can experience it. Your subconscious really enjoys it because it feels good and normal. We are the otters of the universe. We would prefer to play and be relaxed. Our subconscious would anyway, as much as modern society drives us to be stressed all the time. But we'd like to relax, and your subconscious remembers that. It senses it as a normal state, a place that it wants to be. And all we need to do is install some tools for you to use. And again, it's not a control thing. There's no sort of, you're not going to suddenly see a UPS truck and start quacking like a duck. It doesn't work like that. Instead, it's more of a, oh yeah, that's right. I remember how to feel relaxed. And it's a familiarity thing. You know, they say you never forget how to ride a bicycle. Well, you never really do forget how to be relaxed. And sometimes you just need a reminder. You need a little time, and you need somebody to kind of walk you through it and show you, here's how this works. And so as you come out, you feel super relaxed and calm, and a lot of people right in the chair as time comes back to them, as the real world, if you will, comes pouring back in again, can feel the anxiety building, and most of the time you can watch as they begin to use the tools, and you see an immediate reaction. Most people walk out of the office with a significant effect, and anxiety work tends to have sort of, we call it a creeper effect, which means that over the next several days, as the use is reinforced, and as you use both the conscious and the unconscious, subconscious tools that you're given, you find that each success gives you that endorphin dump. And so you say, look, I'm stressed. Oh, that's right. Now I'm not nearly so stressed. And now I feel better. And your brain goes, oh, thank goodness we feel better, and dumps a little bit of chemical in there that makes you feel good. And of course, that's a very repeatable cycle. And it's a lot more pleasant than that fight, freeze, flight thing that we do and get all freaked out and heart pounding and mouth dry and feeling nervous. So I just wanted to throw this out there real fast. I've been thinking a lot about it in the last couple of weeks, and I've been seeing a lot of anxiety, societal anxiety. I'm seeing it on social media. People are stressed, and people I talk to are stressed, and there's good reason for it, and boy, it's also really easy for us to take it overboard, and I think that most of us do it. So whatever you do, you don't have to feel nearly as stressed as you do right now. It's not that bad. And the worst case scenario isn't going to come true. Excuse me. The worst case scenario is very unlikely to come true. So let's stop worrying to that extent. You don't have to pass out or have your hypnotherapist die and get stuck in that state, but a couple of good hypnotherapy sessions might actually help you focus a little better, be a little more prepared for the real actualities rather than the worst case scenario. So I would love to see you. And if you're not in the neighborhood, then like I say, seek out a hypnotherapist, look for somebody to help you with it. You don't have to feel like that proverbial long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. So appreciate you tuning in, and hopefully there was absolutely nothing anxiety producing by this podcast, because that's certainly not the direction we want to go. I'm Rob with Hypnotex, and this is the Hypnotex Podcast.